It was another busy Saturday night at La Bella Vista, and David was running back and forth between tables like he had been doing for the past 3 years. The restaurant was packed as usual, filled with the smell of fresh garlic bread and the sound of wine glasses clinking together. David had this route memorized by now. Take the order, serve the food, clear the plates, smile no matter what. That was the job. He was wiping down table 7 when he saw them walk in. The Hastings family. His stomach dropped a little because he knew exactly what kind of evening this was going to be. They came here twice a month, always demanded the corner table with the best view of the city lights, and always made sure everyone in the restaurant knew they were important people. The hostess seated them at their usual spot, and David took a deep breath before heading over with menus and a warm smile. He had learned a long time ago that a smile could get you through almost anything in this job. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to La Bella Vista," David said politely, placing the menus down carefully. "We have some wonderful specials tonight. The chef has prepared a fresh sea bass with lemon butter sauce, and we also have—" "We don't need to hear all that." Richard Hastings cut him off without even looking up from his phone. He was a large man in an expensive suit, the kind that probably cost more than David's rent for 3 months. "Just bring us the usual. We've been coming here long enough that you should know what we want by now." David kept his smile in place. "Of course, sir. I'll get that started for you right away." As he turned to leave, he heard Mrs. Hastings whisper loudly to her friend, "They really should train the staff better. We shouldn't have to explain ourselves every single time." The friend laughed, and David pretended he didn't hear it. He'd heard worse before. Much worse. The evening continued like that. Every time David came to their table, there was something wrong. The water wasn't cold enough. The bread was too warm. The music was too loud. Could he do something about the people at the next table who were laughing too much? On and on it went. David handled it all with patience. He brought new water with extra ice. He brought fresh bread at room temperature. He spoke to his manager about the music volume. This was part of the job, and he needed this job. Not just for the money, though, that mattered too. He was learning everything he could about how restaurants worked, from the kitchen to the dining room to the business side of things. When it came time to serve their main courses, David carefully balanced 4 plates and approached their table. The restaurant was crowded, and he had to navigate through a tight space. As he was setting down Mrs. Hastings's plate, someone from the next table pushed their chair back suddenly. David stumbled slightly, and his arm brushed against Mrs. Hastings's designer handbag hanging on her chair. She gasped like he had set it on fire. "Excuse me, do you have any idea what you just did?" She grabbed her purse and held it up, inspecting it from every angle like she was searching for damage. "This bag cost $12,000. $12,000. That's more than you probably make in an entire year." The conversations around them started to die down. People were looking now. David felt his face get hot, but he kept his voice steady and professional. "I apologize, ma'am. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to," she mocked, looking around at her companions. "Did you hear that? He didn't mean to. Well, I didn't mean to wear a bag this expensive to a place where the staff can't even walk properly." Her husband Richard joined in, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Honey, relax. He probably doesn't even know what designer brands are. Look at his shoes." David glanced down at his shoes. They were old, yes, but they were clean and polished. He took care of his things. The whole table was laughing now. Their friend in the red dress chimed in. "Can you imagine shopping where he shops? I'd rather wear nothing at all." More laughter. David stood there, still holding an empty tray, waiting for them to finish. He had bills to pay. He had goals he was working toward. He couldn't afford to lose his temper, no matter how much he wanted to tell them exactly what he thought. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Richard said, pulling out his wallet with exaggerated slowness. "You can take this." He pulled out a $1 bill and placed it on the table, making sure to smooth it out so everyone could see. "That's your tip for tonight. Maybe if you save up for 10 or 20 years, you'll be able to afford to eat at a place like this. As a customer, I mean. Not as the help." The entire table erupted in laughter again. Someone clinked their wine glass like Richard had just made the toast of the century. David looked at the dollar bill sitting on the white tablecloth. He looked at their faces red with laughter and wine. He looked around at the other diners who had witnessed the whole thing, some looking away in embarrassment, others shaking their heads in disgust. And then he did something that surprised even himself. He smiled. Not a fake customer service smile, but a real one. "Thank you for dining with us tonight," he said calmly. "I hope you enjoyed your meal." He picked up their empty plates and walked back toward the kitchen with his head held high. Behind him, he could still hear them laughing and talking about him like he was nothing, like he was just some guy who would serve tables his whole life and never amount to anything. They had no idea who he really was. They had no idea what was about to happen. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. David walked into his small studio apartment that night and tossed his keys on the kitchen counter. His feet were killing him from running around the restaurant for 8 hours straight, but his mind was racing too fast to care about being tired. He pulled off his work shoes, made himself a cup of coffee even though it was almost midnight, and sat down at his tiny desk by the window. There was something the Hastings family didn't know about him. Something nobody at the restaurant knew, actually. And tomorrow everything was going to change. 3 years ago, when David was 22, his grandmother had passed away. Her name was Helen, and she had been the most important person in his life. She had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was just 10 years old. While other kids had both parents, David had his grandmother, and honestly, she was worth 10 parents combined. Helen had come to this country with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. She worked cleaning offices at night and sold homemade food during the day. Slowly, year after year, she built a small import business bringing goods from her home country. That small business eventually became a big business. By the time David was in high school, his grandmother owned a successful company worth millions. But Helen never forgot where she came from. She still lived in a modest house. She still cooked her own meals. She still treated the janitor at her office building with the same respect she showed to her biggest clients. And she made sure David understood something important. Money doesn't make you better than anyone else. When she passed away, David inherited everything. $8 million. The lawyer sat him down and explained the terms of her will. His grandmother had been smart about it. She knew that giving a young guy millions of dollars all at once could ruin him, so she had set up conditions. David couldn't touch the money until he turned 25, and during those 3 years he had to prove he could work hard, support himself, and learn what it meant to earn something on his own. His grandmother had left him enough money to pay for school and rent, but nothing extra. No fancy cars, no expensive clothes, just enough to get by if he was careful. The will had said something else too, something David had read so many times he had it memorized. "I want you to understand what it feels like to be treated as less than, so you never treat others that way. I want you to know the value of a dollar earned with your own hands. Only then will you be ready for what I'm leaving you." Tomorrow was his 25th birthday. Tomorrow, he would have full access to everything his grandmother had built. David had spent the last 3 years doing exactly what she wanted. He enrolled in business school and took night classes while working full-time. He chose to work at La Bella Vista, specifically because he wanted to learn the restaurant business from the ground up. He worked in the kitchen for the first year, learning how food costs worked, how to manage inventory, how to deal with suppliers. Then he moved to serving tables, learning what customers wanted, what made them come back, what drove them away. He watched everything. He took notes. He asked questions. Old Mr. Giordano, the owner, had taken a liking to him. Sometimes after the restaurant closed, they would sit together, and Mr. Giordano would share stories about his 40 years in the business. The old man would talk about the mistakes he made, the lessons he learned, the things he would do differently if he could start over. David soaked it all in like a sponge. And now, sitting at his desk with his coffee getting cold, David opened his laptop and pulled up a file he had been working on for months. It was a complete business analysis of La Bella Vista. He knew the restaurant's strengths and weaknesses better than anyone except maybe Mr. Giordano himself. He also knew something that most people didn't. La Bella Vista was for sale. Mr. Giordano was 73 years old and tired. His children had moved to different states and had their own careers. None of them wanted to take over the restaurant. For the past David had been watching the situation carefully. A few corporate investors had looked at the place, but they wanted to gut it and turn it into something completely different. They saw the location and the customer base, but they didn't care about the soul of the place. They didn't care that Mr. Giordano had spent 40 years building relationships and creating something special. That's when David had started putting together a plan. He spent his rare free time researching, creating financial projections, talking to his grandmother's old business attorney about the best way to structure a deal. He had been preparing for this moment. Tonight, after being humiliated by the Hastings family, something had clicked into place. He wasn't angry, not really. He was determined. Those people thought they knew who he was based on his job title and his old shoes. They thought they could measure someone's worth by looking at their bank account or their clothes. They were about to learn a very important lesson. David worked through the night, refining his proposal. He included financial projections, renovation plans, staff development programs, and marketing strategies. Everything was backed up with research and numbers. By the time the sun started coming up, he had a complete business proposal that would make any investor proud. He also had something else. He had a plan for how to handle customers like the Hastings family, because if he was going to own a restaurant, it was going to be a place where people treated each other with respect, where money didn't give you the right to make others feel small. His grandmother would have approved. At 7 a.m, David took a shower, put on the one good suit he owned, and called Mr. Giordano's personal number. The old man answered on the third ring, sounding sleepy. "Mr. Giordano, this is David. I know it's early, but I need to meet with you today. It's important. It's about the restaurant." There was a pause. Then Mr. Giordano said, "Come to my office at 9 o'clock. I'll have coffee ready." David hung up and looked at himself in the mirror. Today the waiter was going to become the owner. And tomorrow night, when the Hastings family came back for their regular reservation, they were going to get the surprise of their lives. David arrived at Mr. Giordano's office at exactly 9 o'clock. The old man's office was above the restaurant, a small room filled with photographs from 40 years of running La Bella Vista. Pictures of wedding parties, anniversary celebrations, and happy customers covered every wall. There was even a faded photo of a young Mr. Giordano standing in front of the restaurant on opening day, looking proud and nervous at the same time. "Come in. Come in," Mr. Giordano said, gesturing to a chair across from his cluttered desk. He poured 2 cups of coffee from an old pot that had probably been making coffee since the restaurant opened. "You sounded serious on the phone. What's on your mind?" David sat down and placed a leather folder on the desk. His hands were steady, but his heart was pounding. This was it. The moment that would change everything. "Mr. Giordano, I want to buy La Bella Vista." The old man stopped mid-sip and stared at him. Then he let out a gentle laugh, the kind you give when you think someone is joking with you. "David, that's very sweet, but I'm completely serious." David opened the folder and slid it across the desk. "I'm offering you $3.5 million. That's $300,000 above your asking price." Mr. Giordano's smile faded. He put down his coffee cup and opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, proof of funds, letters from attorneys, and a detailed business proposal. His eyes moved from page to page, getting wider with each one. "This is real," he whispered, more to himself than to David. "This is actually real." "It's real," David confirmed. "I've been preparing for this for a long time." Mr. Giordano looked up at him with confusion and amazement mixed together on his weathered face. "But you're a waiter. How do you have this kind of money?" "I don't understand." David took a breath and told him everything. About his grandmother Helen and how she came to this country with nothing. About how she built her business through hard work and sacrifice. About how she left him everything but made him wait until he was 25 and learned what it meant to work for something. About how tomorrow was his birthday and he would finally have access to his inheritance. "She wanted me to understand people," David explained. "She wanted me to know what it feels like to be on the bottom, to be treated like you don't matter, so I would never treat others that way. These past 3 years I've been learning, not just about the restaurant business, but about people and respect and what really matters." Mr. Giordano sat back in his chair, and David could see tears forming in the old man's eyes. "Your grandmother sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was," David said softly. "She would have liked you. You remind me of her, actually. You've always treated everyone with respect, from the dishwashers to the wealthiest customers. That's rare." The old man wiped his eyes and looked at the proposal again. "You've really thought this through. These numbers, these plans, this is impressive work. I've been studying every aspect of this restaurant for 3 years. I know what works and what needs improvement. I know the suppliers, the staff, the regular customers. I've worked in the kitchen and the dining room. I understand this business. Mr. Giordano was quiet for a long moment, flipping through the pages. Finally, he looked up. David, I've had several people interested in buying this place. Big companies with lots of money. They want to change everything, turn it into something modern and different. They don't care about what I built here. They just see a location and dollar signs. He paused and tapped the proposal. But you understand what La Bella Vista really is. You care about the people who work here. You care about maintaining what makes this place special. That's exactly right, David said, leaning forward. I want to honor what you've built while bringing in fresh ideas. I want to pay the staff better wages, create opportunities for them to grow. I want to make this place even better than it already is, but without losing its soul. Mr. Giordano stood up and walked to the window overlooking the restaurant below. It was mid-morning, and the cleaning crew was preparing for lunch service. You know what my biggest fear has been? That after I'm gone, this place becomes just another restaurant. That the people I've worked with for years get fired by some corporation that doesn't know their names. He turned back to David. If I sell to you, what happens to the staff? Everyone keeps their job, David said immediately. Not only that, but I want to raise wages across the board. The people working here are the heart of this restaurant. I'm not going to forget that just because I'm signing the checks now instead of receiving them. A smile spread across Mr. Giordano's face. Your grandmother raised you right, so we have a deal? David asked, hardly daring to believe it. Mr. Giordano walked back to his desk and extended his hand. We have a deal. But I have one condition. Anything. You have to come to work tomorrow night as if nothing has changed. Let me announce this properly. The staff deserves to hear this news the right way, and I want to be the one to tell them that one of their own is taking over. David shook his hand firmly. I can do that. Actually, I have a request of my own. What's that? The Hastings family has a reservation tomorrow night at 7. I want to serve their table one last time before everyone knows I'm the new owner. Mr. Giordano raised an eyebrow. Those people were awful to you last night. I saw what happened. I know, David said with a small smile. That's exactly why I want to serve them one more time. The old man studied his face and then nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Something tells me tomorrow night is going to be very interesting. You have no idea, David replied. They spent the rest of the day with lawyers, signing papers and transferring funds. By 5 o'clock that evening, David officially owned La Bella Vista. He walked out of the lawyer's office as the owner of a $3 million restaurant, but nobody else knew yet. And tomorrow night, when the Hastings family walked through those doors expecting to humiliate the poor waiter again, they were going to learn a lesson they would never forget. Tuesday evening arrived, and David put on his waiter uniform just like he had done hundreds of times before. But tonight felt different. Tonight he owned the restaurant. Tonight everything was going to change. He arrived early and helped with the usual prep work. The other servers had no idea what was about to happen. Neither did the kitchen staff or the hostess at the front desk. Mr. Giordano had kept the secret perfectly. Only the two of them knew the truth. At 6:30, Mr. Giordano gathered all the staff in the back room for a quick meeting. David's heart was racing. This was it. I have important news, the old man said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. After 40 years, I've decided it's time for me to step back. I've sold La Bella Vista. You could hear the gasps around the room. Some people looked worried. Others looked shocked. Everyone knew what this could mean. New owners usually meant changes, and changes often meant people losing their jobs. But before you panic, Mr. Giordano continued, raising his hand, let me tell you who the new owner is. He smiled and looked directly at David. It's David. Our David. The room went completely silent for about 3 seconds. Then it exploded with noise. People were talking over each other, asking questions, looking at David and Dee. Carlos, the head chef, was the first to speak up. Wait, David. Our waiter, David? You bought this place? David nodded, feeling overwhelmed by all the attention. Yes, and I want you all to know that nothing bad is going to change. Everyone keeps their jobs. In fact, I'm going to be raising wages and creating new opportunities for growth. The worry on people's faces turned to smiles. Some people started clapping. Maria, who worked the hostess stand, actually started crying happy tears. You're one of us, she said, wiping her eyes. You understand what it's like. I do, David said, and I'm never going to forget that. Mr. Giordano put his hand on David's shoulder. Tonight, David is going to work one more shift as a waiter. Starting tomorrow, he'll be your boss. But tonight, let's give our customers a great evening like we always do. Everyone headed back to their stations, still buzzing with excitement and disbelief. David took a deep breath and checked his section. Table 12, the corner table with the best view. Reserved for 7 o'clock under the name Hastings. At exactly 7, they walked in. Mr. and Mrs. Hastings, along with their usual group of friends. All dressed in expensive clothes, all wearing the same expression of superiority they always had. The woman in the red dress from last time was there too, the one who had laughed the loudest at David. David greeted them at the door with his biggest smile. Good evening. Welcome back to La Bella Vista. Mrs. Hastings barely looked at him. Oh, wonderful, it's you again. Let's hope you can manage not to ruin our evening this time. I'll certainly do my best, David said, leading them to their table. Inside, he was calm. Tonight was going to be perfect. He took their orders with complete professionalism. When they sent back the bread because it wasn't warm enough, he brought new bread with a smile. When Mr. Hastings complained that his water had too much ice, David brought him a fresh glass. Every insult, every rude comment, every snapped finger he handled with grace. The other servers kept giving him confused looks. They knew he owned the place now. Why was he letting these people treat him this way? But David just smiled and continued doing his job perfectly. As David was serving their main courses, Mr. Giordano appeared from the back office. He was wearing his best suit, something he only did for special occasions. He walked to the center of the dining room and picked up a wine glass, tapping it gently with a spoon. The restaurant gradually went quiet. People stopped eating and turned to look. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please, Mr. Giordano announced, his voice carrying across the room. I have a very special announcement to make tonight. The Hastings table looked up with mild interest. Mrs. Hastings whispered something to her friend, and they both giggled. After 40 wonderful years, I have sold La Bella Vista, Mr. Giordano continued. This restaurant has been my life, my passion, and my purpose. Selling it was not an easy decision. Mrs. Hastings whispered loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Finally, maybe the new owners will hire better staff. Mr. Giordano smiled, and David could see the mischief in the old man's eyes. I want to introduce you all to the new owner, someone who has worked here for 3 years, someone who understands what makes this place special, someone who has learned this business from the ground up. He gestured toward David, who removed his waiter's apron and stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the new owner of La Bella Vista is David Chen. The restaurant erupted in applause. The staff clapped the loudest, cheering and whistling. Regular customers who had gotten to know David over the years stood up to congratulate him. But at table 12, the Hastings family sat frozen. Mrs. Hastings' mouth hung open. Mr. Hastings had gone pale. Their friends looked around in confusion, trying to understand what was happening. David walked to the center of the dining room and thanked Mr. Giordano with a handshake and a hug. Then he addressed the restaurant. Thank you all so much, he said. Mr. Giordano built something incredible here, and I promise to honor his legacy. This restaurant has always been about more than just food. It's about family, respect, and treating every single person who walks through that door with dignity. As he spoke, his eyes moved to the Hastings table. They were all staring at him now, the realization of what had happened slowly sinking in. I've learned a lot working here, David continued. I've learned that how you treat people says everything about who you are. That kindness costs nothing but means everything, and that every person deserves respect, regardless of what job they do or how much money they make. The restaurant applauded again, and David made his way back through the dining room. He had one more table to visit, one final conversation to have, and the Hastings family was about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. David walked slowly toward table 12. Every step felt important, like he was walking toward something he'd been preparing for his entire life. The Hastings family watched him approach, and he could see the panic starting to set in on their faces. Mr. Hastings was the first to try to fix the situation. He stood up quickly, almost knocking over his wine glass, and stuck out his hand with a forced smile. Well, congratulations. This is wonderful news. We had no idea. We were just, having a bit of fun the other night. You understand, right? Just friendly teasing between regulars and staff. David didn't shake his hand. He simply looked at it until Mr. Hastings awkwardly pulled it back. "Friendly teasing," David repeated quietly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. It was the $1 bill Mr. Hastings had left as a tip 2 nights ago. David had kept it. "Is this what you call friendly?" Mrs. Hastings let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on now. Don't be so sensitive. We're some of your best customers. We've been coming here for years. Surely you're not going to let one little joke ruin our relationship." "A joke," David said, still keeping his voice calm and steady. "You called me the help. You said I would never be able to afford to eat here. You mocked my shoes and made sure everyone around us knew that you thought I was beneath you." The woman in the red dress tried to speak up. "Look, maybe we had a bit too much wine that night. People say things they don't mean when—" "You meant every word," David interrupted. "And that's fine. You're entitled to your opinions. But here's what you need to understand. Every person working in this restaurant has a story. Every single one." He gestured toward the dining room. "Carlos, our head chef, trained in some of the best kitchens in Europe. He could work anywhere he wants. But he chooses to work here because Mr. Giordano treated him like family when he first came to this country. Maria, at the front desk, is putting herself through nursing school. She works here at night and studies during the day, getting by on 4 hours of sleep. Tommy, who parked your car tonight, is supporting his elderly mother who has cancer. He sends half his paycheck home to pay for her treatment." The Hastings table had gone quiet. Other diners nearby were listening too. "These people aren't beneath you," David continued. "They're not less than you. They're human beings with dreams and families and struggles and victories. And in my restaurant, they will be treated with respect." "Your restaurant," Mrs. Hastings said, and her voice had an edge to it now. The fake politeness was gone. "Fine, you got lucky. You probably inherited money or won the lottery or something. But don't stand there and lecture us about respect. We've been loyal customers for years. We've spent thousands of dollars here. And that's supposed to excuse how you treat people?" David asked. "You think spending money gives you the right to make others feel worthless?" Mr. Hastings stood up again, and this time his face was red with anger. "Now listen here. We don't have to take this. There are plenty of other restaurants in this city. You need customers like us." David nodded slowly. "You're absolutely right. There are plenty of other restaurants, and you're free to go to any of them." He pulled out their bill from his apron pocket and placed it on the table. "This is your final bill. It's calculated correctly down to the penny. Tonight's meal is on the house. Consider it a parting gift." Mrs. Hastings looked like she'd been slapped. "You're banning us?" "You can't do that." "I absolutely can," David said calmly. "This is my restaurant now, and I get to decide who eats here. Your reservation privileges are revoked. You're not welcome back." "This is ridiculous," Mr. Hastings sputtered. "We'll tell everyone we know about this. We'll write reviews. We'll make sure everyone knows how you treated us." David smiled. "Please do. Tell everyone you know that La Bella Vista is now a place where kindness matters, where staff members are valued as human beings, where having money doesn't give you permission to treat others poorly. Tell everyone that this restaurant has standards now, and those standards include how you treat people." He paused and looked each of them in the eye. "And while you're at it, tell them about the waiter you mocked, the one you thought would never amount to anything. Tell them he bought the restaurant you loved so much. I think that's a story worth sharing." The Hastings family gathered their things in angry silence. Mrs. Hastings made one last attempt. "You're making a huge mistake. People like us bring in other wealthy customers. Without us, this place will fail. I'd rather fail treating people with dignity than succeed by accepting cruelty," David said. "But don't worry about this place. We'll be just fine." As the Hastings family walked toward the exit, something unexpected happened. The entire restaurant started clapping. It started with Carlos in the kitchen doorway, then spread to the other staff members and then to the customers. People stood up and applauded as the Hastings family left. One elderly customer stopped David as he walked past. "Young man, I've been coming here for 15 years. What you just did took courage. You earned a loyal customer for life." Over the next few weeks, word spread about what had happened. Some entitled customers stopped coming, but they were quickly replaced by people who appreciated what La Bella Vista had become. David raised wages like he promised. He created a scholarship fund for staff members pursuing education. He established a profit-sharing program so everyone benefited when the restaurant did well. Business didn't just survive. It thrived. 3 months later, David received a letter. It was from the daughter of Mrs. Hastings. She had been at that dinner and witnessed everything. Her letter was an apology. She wrote about how embarrassed she'd been by her family's behavior, and how watching David that night had changed her perspective on a lot of things. She asked if there were any job openings at the restaurant. She wanted to learn what real character looked like, she wrote. She wanted to understand what her family had never taught her about treating people with respect. David called her the same day and offered her a position as a server. She started the following week, and she turned out to be one of the hardest working employees he had. On the 1-year anniversary of buying La Bella Vista, David stood in the dining room after closing and looked around at everything his grandmother had made possible. Not just the money she'd left him, but the lessons she'd taught him about humility, hard work, and human dignity. He thought about that dollar bill, which he'd framed and hung in his office as a reminder. A reminder that how people treat you says nothing about your worth and everything about theirs. A reminder that success isn't about how much money you have, but about how you use it to lift others up. His grandmother would have been proud, and that meant more to him than anything else in the world.